All right, welcome to multi-state payroll taxation. So let's start by talking about what we're going to review today. All right, so first of all, we're going to talk about the three big facets of multi-state taxation. So the first thing we're going to review is residency and understand that and how that functions. And we're going to talk a little bit about how most employers do it and then how we can make it better, right? So, so a lot to review there from a multi-state taxation perspective for residency, because a lot of us do it a little bit different than you may anticipate. So definitely want to make sure that there is some visibility around that. We'll talk about reciprocity agreements. What are they and what are they not? So many times we think reciprocity agreements are just any agreement between states, and that's not the case. And this is how some of these get misused or not handled appropriately. So definitely want to review that with you. So we'll talk through those reciprocities and make it sure it's real nice and clear of what they are, what they're not, and how you can properly handle them. We'll talk about resident and non-resident withholding rules. What are they and how are they impacted? So, from a resident and non-resident withholding rules perspective, what are those key things that you need to do on a regular basis? So, definitely want to review that from a resident and non-resident withholding rules perspective. Evaluating taxation from multiple states. So this is one slide in the handout to where I kind of pull everything together and say, okay, when we're saying we're looking at multi-state withholding, what are all the different pieces of information I need to really determine that appropriate withholding? And this is a great slide to put up in your offices or cubicles. So then that way you can really analyze that from that perspective. Then we'll dive into what wages are subject to tax. So, from a multi state perspective, there could be a concern around what things are subject to taxation. That could look a little bit different from a different states. Now, the good news here is that a lot of states have a very similar definition, but there can be some nuances that are different. So I like to point out those, so then that way you can watch out for them. Withholding compliance issues. So, from a withholding compliance issue perspective, what are other things you need to be considering of? One is the forms, right? State forms and how they vary. Two can be what wages, you know, are taxed in what state based on state requirements. We'll talk a little bit about allocation versus apportionment and what that means. Courtesy taxation. So, not always are we required to withhold the tax. Sometimes it's a tax that the employee owes that we don't have to necessarily withhold, but we may be asked to. So, how do you handle that? And what is courtesy taxation? What is it not? And what does it mean when you do those? Then we'll talk about state unemployment. So, state unemployment is defined completely differently than state withholding. So, we'll talk through what that means and how you would, make sure to analyze that. I do throw in here traveling employees. Um, you know,